Hi, listener. This is From Ideology to Unity, a spiritual journey where we let go of ego and ideological doctrine in favor of meaning, purpose, and unity as a whole. Today, I'm interviewing Miguel Conner, host of Aeon Byte Gnostic Radio, a podcast and YouTube channel addressing a wide range of mystic topics and, of course, Gnosticism. Hi, how are you doing?
I'm doing good. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, it's a pleasure. So, if you were to sum up what your podcast is about or your radio, how would you explain it to someone?
I would say it is a show about bringing ancient mysteries to a modern meaning, centered around the forbidden or contraband truths of the ancient Gnostics and Hermetics and their brethren in the esoteric, as I like to call them. Obviously, that would include Kabbalists, Sufis, perhaps certain secret societies, and so forth. So that would be it in a nutshell.
I love the way you put things, especially in introductions. Like, I don't know, I don't even know how to explain it. It's got this how did you develop, your introductions?
At first it was pure necessity. When back in the old days of podcasting, when the equipment was not too good unless you're a professional, there was no iTunes to put podcasts. So to compensate for the bad audio quality, and you can still get those shows, those old shows, you can tell the quality of the interviews. Nothing like this, like Zoom. So I would put little background music to sort of hide some of the bad quality.
Right.
And then I would get these strange impulses to when I was pausing and thinking during an intro, I would just, I think I said something that I don't like, so I'm going to throw in a movie quote. Or if I'm stressing something about Gnosticism, I'm going to throw in the Matrix. And before you knew it, it sort of got out of hand. I mean, I would say my intros they're audio versions of memes. I mean, what are memes? Memes are political, philosophical messages couched with modern culture imagery and to put a point. And I think that's what my intros do. I throw commentary, I throw cultural context in the form of audio instead of visual, like memes, and these are all to make a point.
Right. Yeah. So, honestly, I just forgot what my question was. So I'll ask something else.
You got to write these down.
What is Gnosis?
Gnosis is it's from the Greek for knowledge, but in the perspective or the context of the ancient Gnostics and Hermetics, it is sort of a direct experiential contact with higher forms of consciousness or the divine. And it is also a realization of the reality that we live in. Obviously, to the Gnostics and Hermetics, they would be closer to Neo in the Matrix, or Truman in the Truman Show, that we live in a simulated reality, and through this knowledge, we can break down this reality, see through the veils, the illusions of these beings that rule the universe, called Archons, sometimes referred to as angels, as well as the true nature of what we are, the construct that we are, into something divine deep within us, but still be able to experience these higher forms of consciousness, divinity, in order to become awakened, enlightened, saved, whatever you want to talk about. So Neo taking the red pill in the Matrix would be an example of the beginning of Gnosis.
Okay. Well, speaking of higher forms of consciousness, was that involved with these impulses you had to add the memes in?
I think they were. I mean, creating art certainly can stimulate Gnosis. There's a Gnostic bishop and also author and scholar named Stephen Heller. And he always said every serious artist is already half a Gnostic. So when you are a creator and you're trying to craft something new and really explore the spaces of consciousness or the human condition or the human psyche, you are going to find things stirring within you and reach beyond the normative boundaries of what we call reality. So my intros would certainly are a way when I put them together, but when I write fiction sometimes, or times that I've written poetry, I can feel that, again, that direct knowledge with a higher form of consciousness. We all have that capability.
Right. Did you start with fiction and poetry and then find spirituality from that?
I mean, I've always been a seeker, but I've also always been a writer, whether in my day jobs or gigs, being a copywriter or writing fiction, novels, short stories, scripts. So I've always been a seeker and a creative type.
Yeah, I can relate to that. So you just naturally explored more and more, and that's how you got into Gnosticism.
Yeah, I would say I've always looked at different religions, and like many people, I always had that feeling that I did not belong into this world, that something was wrong with this world, like a splinter in your mind driving you mad, as Morpheus tells Neo. And I always was seeking for something bigger or greater, or trying to look beyond the veils of this world to see who was the man behind the curtain. And I saw it. I sometimes wasn't a very good seeker, and I had to cope through other negative methods like drugs and alcohol, sometimes immersing myself in fiction or video games or other things, and sort of trying this balance of looking for the truth of this world that I didn't belong to and just trying to cope with the simulation around us. And eventually Gnosticism just made more sense for me, for my path.
All right. Well, I can relate to that as well. Yeah. There's this concept you've mentioned a number of times, or other people, your guests, have mentioned as well, and it's the Pleroma. And I don't quite know what it is. How do you explain that?
The Pleroma it's Greek for fullness, and to the Gnostics, it's the fullness of the divine. It is the mind of God. I guess Carl Jung would call it the undivided.
Is it the Godhead?
You could say that. I mean, to the Gnostics or Hermetics, the Godhead was a network of capabilities that in total was, yeah, you could say almost like a mind. And that's what the Pleroma is. It's the undivided. I don't think it's a place. I think it's more a state of being outside of time and space, and certainly something we can access at times. So to the Gnostics, that would be the highest form of existence, the undivided, the wholeness, the one, where everything is truly one because everything is outside of time and space, or it's a place that is beyond time and space. It's everywhere, but when you pull those two things down, you see the Pleroma, or as Plotinus would call it, the news, or the one. So I guess the Buddhists would call it Nirvana. They don't. Many Buddhists say it's not a place to go like heaven, but it's sort of a state of mind that becomes the ultimate existence for you.
Right. I suppose it's fundamentally linked to the nature of the soul, and the soul, when it's not connected to a body, maybe.
Yeah, I mean, what is the soul? To the Gnostics, they would call it the divine spark, a shard of infinity that is lost in this material world, or hoarded over by these Archons and placed within each one of us. And the shard of infinity pretty much fuels the universe. And it is our job to find a way for the shard of infinity to rejoin the fullness, or the Pleroma. And I know we're talking distancing in places, but again, it's more of a state of being than anything, if you want to approach it that way.
It's a
So that's how,
reunification.
yeah, unification with wholeness, with the mind of the supreme consciousness, or the alien God, as the Gnostics called it. So
Okay.
it's almost an awareness that we are the mind of God, and if we wake up, we will have the awareness of God, but we will also be God at the same time.
Cool. So the Archons, are they all bad? Do they vary? What are they?
The Archons, as I mentioned, are the stellar fate lords that oversee the universe, as the Gnostics would say. Greek from prince. And in the Gnostic cosmology, there's many variants of how it happened, but somehow through a cosmic cataclysm, sometimes done by the might say part of the mind of the god called Sophia that rebelled, and she gave birth to our universe. And through her passions and her fears and darkness, as she rebelled and was thrown out of the Pleroma, she gave birth to these beings called Archons, the chief one being called the Demiurge. For Plato and many systems, the Demiurge was the grand architect that shaped the world. But to the Gnostics, the Demiurge was this sort of demented, ignorant, supreme being that created a very faulty universe and still tried to trap these divine sparks that came from the Pleroma after the cosmic or pre-cosmic cataclysm. And the Archons are simply the servants of this Demiurge, and they're the ones who hide the divine spark, keep us humans asleep and ignorant of our origins, and mismanage this universe, this bad software that we call reality. Obviously, you could associate the Archons sometimes with the fallen angels of the book of Enoch, who then give birth to the what do you call it, the Nephilim. And but in a nutshell, that's who the Archons would be, sort of I guess fallen angels or rulers of this universe.
Right. So they originated from the oneness, but they've rejected unity and represent the opposite.
Not reject the universe. They think they are out here away from the Pleroma, and they think they can run the universe or organize matter in a sort of twisted, bizarro shape of the Pleroma. And they exist through feeding off the divine spark. But ultimately, they're just as ignorant as we humans are of the Pleroma, just as arrogant, and just feel that they're very happy with this veil of tears, or the ship of fools we call the universe, and they feel they can run it.
Okay. So how does Abraxas link to this?
Ooh, well, there's many myths. The Gnostics had many myths depending on the region and the visions of each, you might say, neophyte, and more like Hierophant. Because, I mean, anytime we have an experience, it's going to vary. If you have 10 people witnessing a divine being or a cosmic transcosmic event, we're going to get different interpretations. I mean, you have 3-4 people watching a car wreck are going to have completely different versions of it. So they had different versions, but Abraxas is an ancient magical name for a being that is well, the interpretation varied. To some Gnostic sages, he was associated with the Demiurge, although not as malignant or ignorant as the Demiurge of the Gnostics. The Gnostics associated the Demiurge with the God of the Old Testament, so he didn't have very good qualities. But Abraxas was a little bit more. One Gnostic sage, Basilides, had 365 dimensions. And we on earth were the lowest dimension, ruled by the God of the Old Testament. Abraxas, each dimension had a ruler, an archon, and Abraxas ruled all 365 dimensions. So imagine trying to get to the mind of God with that. Wouldn't have been easy, but he wasn't either benign nor malignant. It's just the way the universe was ordered to stay in some sort of organization, some sort of harmony. To others, he was actually I'd say the Pleroma. He was the representation of the Pleroma, as far as you could see reality, because the Pleroma is beyond reality, but as far as you could just understand what everything in the Pleroma, what eternity is, Abraxas would have been that representation. To Carl Jung, he was a negative being. Carl Jung had his visions of Abraxas, which he put in the Red Book, and some of his other writings, and he would put Abraxas in sort of the negative side. Abraxas was the highest being of the material world, but he was also the you might say he was the force, but also with the shadow side of the force. He was a creator, but he was the destroyer, maybe like Kali in Hinduism or Shiva. And he was a being that sort of he sustained and fueled the universe with his energy, but he also destroyed and drank upon the essence of the universe. So he was a being that you should probably avoid, according to Carl Jung. So there were different interpretations of Abraxas, but it certainly was a being that was called upon for magical spells. We have Abraxas gems. The name Abraxas appears in magical papyri. So it was a being of force that the ancients called upon for different reasons.
Wow. I really like to hear your answer about this. So
I don't have an answer. The beauty about somebody like Sophia or the Demiurge of Abraxas is that there's a multiplicity of interpretations and meanings, and I can use the one I want to use depending on the time of the day or where I am in my life. I mean, it's like myths. I mean, you look at the Greek myths. Some myths Hercules does this, some myths he's a jerk, some he's a hero. In different parts of the region, these myths change, but they all challenge us to look inward and sort of feel something stirring in our souls that get us closer to something transcendental.
Right. So I suppose they're all catalysts in different ways.
I would say so. I mean, this is, again, we're dealing with mythology, we're dealing with magical systems, we're dealing with individuals that were trying to describe something that was sublime and ineffable and beyond belief. So they were trying to describe it and put it in a system or an order that might make sense to their individual lodges or people around it. But ultimately, these things, Abraxas, the Demiurge, the Pleroma, are beyond description. All we can do is sort of create some stories and patterns that hopefully reflects the true nature of what is beyond reality and the all of the universe.
Yeah. Okay. So one of the things that really drew me to Gnosticism, I mean, the first time I discovered it was actually when I looked into Jung. But other than that, I found that it has a lot of similarities to the spirituality I got into, which is the law of one, based on the Ra material. Have you heard of that?
The law of one, no, you might have to expand.
Okay. So in like the early 80s, there was there was this guy who researched UFOs and stuff, and basically through channeling, which I'm sure you've heard of, they channeled a being that called himself Ra, that claimed to be the collective consciousness originating from Venus, that apparently is now in the sun. Like, and it described about how the universe worked and a lot of different information about the human past and how there's like 7 levels of reality, although also that they're kind of like subjective. Like, so basically, like there's 7 different densities is linked to like light and like love. And so it goes from the first, which is like objects, the second, which is like animals, we're the third. And this level we choose whether we're serving others or serving ourselves. Service to self, service to others. And then the next one is the level of love, and the level of wisdom is above that, and the level of, I don't know what the level above that is, but basically as you go up, you sort of get closer to unity with source of creation. But then each level has 7 within it. and each level subsection has 7 within it in an infinite fractal way. And it just Gnosticism, when I looked into that, it just seemed to have a lot of similarities to it.
Yeah, I would say so. I mean, I should have mentioned that there are levels of reality as you make contact with
Dimensions.
the Pleroma. It does look like when you have the diagrams of the universe of the Gnostics, it can be very fractal. Everything is within each other, even as you go up these levels. And they seem to be dimensional levels, like I talked about, 365 levels. But some have said it's just levels of being, levels of existence. The
Right.
journey to the Pleroma could easily be taken from within instead of some sort of shamanistic altered state of mind, which the Gnostics were known to take these astral flights.
I've got a question. So do you think that maybe there's a spiritual awakening going on Earth right now?
Ooh, that's a good question. I would say to some, but not to others. I don't think it's going to change. I wish I could be positive. I think those who want to really pivot in these shifting times where the veil seems to be lifted, where uncertainty seems to be going on, where it seems the Archons and the representatives seem to be playing putting their cards on the table while playing their hands one last time. Yes, there's opportunity for awakening and destiny and purpose, but unfortunately, those who are going to choose the path of security and fear, then things aren't going to go very well, which usually means falling down, collapsing into more ignorance and even more fear, and eventually sort of a psychic numbness. So it depends. I don't think there's a collective awakening, although some agree with me, some don't. I think the world is the world and people are going to be people.
And there's a lot of uncertainty.
It's unfortunate. But there is opportunity in uncertainty. That's where you can make a gut check. That's when you can tell yourself, I'm really not in control of anything. All I've been holding on to all my life is these illusions of security, of stability, of a world where the leaders cared about me. But now I can let go of these illusions and sort of forge my path into creating something better.
Right.
And going within and finding this this strength that is mine, that is hereditary, that I was given, this eternity that is within me, and using that to light the way for myself and others into a better future, a better state of being, or just a nicer way of approaching the world.
Right. And a lot of people really are questioning whether the authorities of various kinds can be trusted and everything they've been taught.
Yeah, I mean, if there's a good thing, is I think those in power have sort of exposed themselves these last few years. So the question is, do we take advantage of it, or again sell out as many people would do, just so they can go back to the old normal?
Yeah.
And just so there is stability, and we'll make the best of it instead of really reaching our potential and reaching out to others and expanding our consciousness to places we could have only imagined when we were children.
Here's a question. What is Gnostic Anarchy?
Well, the word anarchy is Greek and it means no archons. So any Gnosticism is anarchy, right? You have no archons. The archons are always represented as these dull-witted, perverse bureaucrats with a lot of power, the power of angels, the power of gods, who mismanage the universe. They're bureaucratic, they're mechanical, they have no creativity. So the Gnostics always envisioned a world where you can get beyond the archons, where you are just driven by your inner light.
Excuse me. I just want to deal with the cat. Could you just briefly, could you just explain it while I'm gone a bit more? Like, feel free to elaborate.
Well, no, I don't want to talk to nothing. I'm
I'm
not going to talk to nothing.
I won't be long then.
All right.
Yeah, that's all right. So, yeah, you're saying about the Archons and Gnostic Anarchy, which is something I think Philip K. Dick was interested in.
Yeah, I mean, well, I think he was definitely more libertarian if you talk about politically, but the Gnostic, and he was obviously very, very influenced by Gnosticism. But you could say, yeah, anarchy is certainly very much a Gnostic thought, where you are not ruled by these spiritual forces in high places and the representatives in the earth. That's what our rulers have said for years. We, the kings and the priests and the queen and all that, we're the representatives of God on earth, and they haven't done a good job. So Gnosticism would definitely fall under the umbrella of anarchy when it comes to politics. But of course, it's individualistic. So of course, a lot of Gnostics that I know are socialists, some are right-wing, but yeah, spiritually anarchists, I would say that is. The Gnostics were known to live in work in small lodges, independent lodges, with maybe one teacher, but all in small churches, but never really organized, structured as you would with common religions.
Yeah, I feel like it might be something to emulate more decentralized structures that don't rely on collapsing faulty ones.
Yeah. I mean, as somebody said in the guest, you look at like Alcoholics Anonymous. This is a big organization that, yeah, the dog's very excited. This is an organization that is across the world. Millions of people go to it, but it's really disorganized. There's an office in New York. There's an office in New York. What's so excited about? Down. The kids are back.
Maybe he's talking about philosophy in his own way.
Yeah, down. There you go. But it's disorganized, it's anarchist, but it seems to work. So
one thing I do come across though is that they tend to often believe in secularism, which is interesting because they're anti-establishment, but in a way, secularism is part of what the establishment teaches us.
Yeah, I mean, not even secularism. I think they want to suck out the spirit out of things. So I'm not a fan of scientism, that's for sure.
Yeah. Something fascinating about, what do you think about quantum physics?
I'm not a scientist. Vance, my producer and co-host for Aeon Byte, that's something he's into it, but I've never really gone into it. I really can't speak to it. A lot of guests do speak to it, like Anthony Peake and so forth, but not my expertise by a long shot.
All right. Do you know much about the Hermetic laws?
About what?
The Hermetic laws.
The
Hermeticism.
Well, yeah, I mean, you might say is pagan Gnosticism. It has some of the same ideals, same cosmologies, leaning on Gnosis. Hermeticism and Gnosticism certainly probably started in Alexandrian ancient Egypt, and they're both descendants from the great Egyptian mysteries.
So what are the great Egyptian mysteries?
Well, those are the mystery religions from Egypt, the great information and tradition of the soul leaving the body and taking that journey with Ra and the serpent to eternity that the Egyptians definitely innovated. I mean, the Greek philosophers like Plato and Pythagoras, they said that everything they learned, they got from the Egyptians, from doing the Egyptian mysteries. But these mysteries were sort of fading under Greek rule and eventual Christian rule, and it would be the Gnostics and the Hermetics who sort of took that vibe or that information, probably from maybe priests or secret societies in Egypt.
Right. So could you give a brief overview about the history of Gnosticism from like maybe the time of Christ sort of time, or like its earlier stages to like all the way to like the Cathars?
Well, I don't think we have hours to do that.
If you could massively summarize it.
Massively summarize it. Again, I just said Probably there's many theories on the origins of Gnosticism. We still have a lot to learn. I would say, to me, it seems to be, again, came out of the Egyptian mysteries, probably a mixture of Egyptian hierophants, mystics, who perhaps joined with dissatisfied Jews who were tired of the corrupt temple, and sometimes pagans, and they would meet in these lodges in Lower Egypt, Alexandria, and they would conduct these astral rituals while also contemplating the nature of the universe. And obviously, to the Gnostics, they always had, you might say, a Gnostic revealer, a spiritual teacher or father or patron. So Jesus became an important patron to many of the Gnostics. Although obviously later on there would be others, Simon Magus, even with some Gnostics that moved to Asia, it would be the Buddha. And these Gnostic revealers, these revealers of light, well, they were important for the lodges, just like Hermes. Hermes was another there you go. Hermes was another. Hermes Trismegistus was another, you might say, Gnostic revealer.
Was he Thoth?
Yes, at some point he was Thoth. He was a mixture of Thoth and Hermes, two gods that really became recognized as one, maybe three, whenever the Greeks took over Egypt, about 300 BC or so. So you had the Christian Gnostics that came out, you had the Hermetics, and eventually Gnosticism became a threat to the growing Orthodox Christianity. It was crushed, but some of it was able to continue in the form of the Manichaeans in Europe. The Bogomils, Gnosticism came through and evolved into Sufism with the Arabs, the Kabbalah with the Jewish people, the Mazdakites with the Persians, and eventually the Cathars were one of the manifestations of the Gnostics in the Middle Ages, 11th, 12th century. But of course, as throughout history, it was eventually crushed as it was seen as a threat to the state.
Yeah, that's something I've talked about in my podcast a bit. This idea that the way I put it is it's like a Roman psyop where they co-opted Christianity because it was like, or whatever, the teachings of Christ, and turned it into something they could use and can control with guilt and shame rather than love.
Yeah, well, if you want to have a world religion, that's kind of what you have to do, unfortunately. That's part of the blueprint. I prefer, again, the anarchist, small, independent lodges kind of system like AA. So I'm not one into a corporate religion with like what's happened with Christianity, Islam, Buddhism, all those other big religions.
So generally, mysticism is generally this more decentralized approach.
It seems to be. I mean, if you have your own experiences, if you make contact with something greater and expand your consciousness where you yourself can recognize you are God and you are divine, you're not going to be very easy to control, are you? You might not even be very friendly to other people. You might just want to be alone with your really close-knit friends who've had same experiences. So yeah, I think mysticism, that's the danger of mysticism. That's why even big religions like the Catholic Church, they'll allow mysticism as long as they can control it within their mythology, keep it under wraps, or keep a heavy eye on it.
Well, speaking of Catholic mysticism, there was a Catholic mystic that I'm quite interested in. What's his name? I've definitely talked about him. I've just gone blank right now. But Meister Eckhart.
Oh yeah.
I don't know if you know anything more about him.
Yeah, I really can't speak to him. I mean, I've read some of his stuff. He was a Protestant, but yeah, he's got some beautiful stuff on.
Was he?
I think he was Protestant. I'm not sure if he was Catholic.
Yeah,
it's been a long time since I read.
That's not part of your specialization, I guess.
No, unfortunately.
So, what do you think about the Anunnaki?
I don't know if they are aliens. I mean, I've had UFO experiences. I'm interested in
Oh,
ufology, but again, that is more Sumerian stuff. It's a fascinating religion. I think the Gnostics, well, I think everybody in ancient times was informed by Sumeria and a lot of their myths. It's interesting because even in the Sumerian myths, Eve is actually superior to Adam or equal when you look at the original creation story and the first man and woman. And interesting, in the Gnostic myths, Eve is superior to Adam, very different than what we get in the Bible, if you would. So I would say the Gnostics were certainly mainlining a lot of these ancient myths. There is and these myths sort of live, they just take shape. I mean, there is a lot in the myth of Sophia that is very close to the myth of Inanna or Ishtar. But yeah, but as far as giving some speech about Anunnaki and aliens, yeah, I'd rather not.
You don't want to go into aliens at all?
Yeah, all the time. Yeah.
Okay, so what was your UFO experience?
I was in Lisbon visiting my family outside of Lisbon. And it was one night, we were the big group of people. It was summer, so everybody was out at night in the mountains doing stuff. I was with my kid, and we saw these incredible lights going around the mountain, making shapes and forms that no earthcraft could have done. It was just stunning. And it wasn't some sort of delusion, because everybody saw it. In fact, my family said that these sightings were normal. Even the gossip newspapers were printing them. It had become so normal in Portugal. So it was an incredible experience seeing these lights. Now, of course, you might say it could be breakaway civilization or secret USA or Russian crafts that they were testing. That's a possibility. I'll leave that open.
Yeah.
But until then, until something exposes that, it was definitely extraterrestrial.
Yeah, I mean, even when you talk about like American craft or whatever, like, some of it might be using technology given by aliens or taken from,
or they're hiding it from us. They're only going to pull it out when they want to pull it out, which would be impressive.
True. Yeah, the way they bring in technology, like, I don't know, like they're ahead. How many years ahead are they from?
Yeah, I mean, the internet was already being planned in the 50s, and then they slowly use it, and then they release it to serfs in the 90s or late 80s.
Did the way it turned out, was that according to the plan, or were there certain things about how the internet happened like that weren't under their control?
I don't know. That's a good question. I mean, you'd have to look at the history of the internet. I think once they don't need it, they try to commercialize it to the masses. Now, I don't know if the internet got out of hand or not. It doesn't seem to be. It seems to be like anything else, a mixed bag. It's a great way of control. At the same time, it's a great way for liberation, for your individual liberation. I think I always agree with Carl Jung. Everything casts a shadow. Once you let the genie out of the bag, good things and bad things are going to happen.
Right. And so I guess it's never really over, the spiritual battle, let's say, because we've never lost and we've never won, perhaps. There's always, I don't know, what do you think?
Yeah, well, we're down here on this place in this state of existence. The battle will always go on. Everything, light and darkness will always go at it. But there is part of us that is higher than that, and we can experience that.
So, do you think that an understanding of Jungian psychology is important for, let's say, awakening? Or do you not need it if you're aware of spiritual stuff?
I would say it's essential from my point of view. I mean, if there's something that people don't do today, is they're not looking inward. They're playing right into what all of Carl Jung's warnings, if you would. how we project on the internet, how
Oh,
we
yeah.
take what's inside of us and project it and dump it on other people so callously, not just on the internet, but on politicians, on our leader, even though we voted for them. And we are not looking at the inner world that is within us, because when that inner world is healed, as Carl Jung said, individuated, then we really do become divine. All the answers come to us, our purpose comes to us. And human beings are very complex creatures. In Carl Jung's system, we have the ego, but we also have the great unconscious, which is that you might say it's the Pleroma, the collective unconscious, the repository of all the information of humanity in the world. The Akashic records would be something like that. We have an unconscious, and the unconscious is always speaking through us through dreams. If we don't listen, it speaks to us through mental disease or physical pain or anxiety. But this unconscious has all the answers of what our purpose is on life. I always like what Carl Jung said: free will is doing exactly what you're supposed to be doing. In other words, each one of us has a destiny from the Pleroma or the unconscious. And if we listen to it instead of our ego, who wants to control the narrative of reality, then things are going to go really well. If we don't, we're always going to be in a state of unbalance, unhappiness, and shock. And even more, isn't more than just the ego and the unconscious. We have something called a shadow, which is everything I do not want to be. These things that we don't look from our past, from our desires, that keeps coming up and we keep projecting onto others, or they manifest as mental diseases or other things. Then we have something called complexes, which is the different personalities that we have. We are not just one person. We are many people. We just haven't realized it. For example, there is have you ever noticed that something will trigger you and you'll get a fight with your family member just like that? It's like something is taken over. Or the guy who gets in the car and he gets really angry as soon as he's in the car. Outside of the car, he's a very calm guy, but these complexes come out. They're sort of a parallel quasi personalities of us that take over, because they're really just a whole bunch of pain and trauma that's been legoed together and comes out at certain points that our ego allows to sort of cope with reality or inform us that we need to take care of this. I don't know if you've watched that documentary by Adam Curtis, Can't Get You Out of My Head, but he puts out a whole bunch of information that, we human beings the individual doesn't exist. We are a mess of different things, and our ego is just there telling us a story that we're in control and that we're one person. But there is no individual. But the good news, as Jung or the Gnostics would say, if we can go within and recognize these inner archons and aeons and integrate them to ourselves and overcome them and make peace with it, then we become like the Pleroma. We become undivided. We become supreme, and we understand what our purpose is on this planet.
Right.
And life gets very good very quick.
Is our life purpose on this planet a sort of a unique divine personality?
Different for everybody, but it is divine because it is true, it's authentic, something most people never experience, and it does matter, and it does take us to some higher transcendental places, and it does good for the world. Each one of us has a purpose that's going to help a lot of people.
All right,
and
so
animals.
what sort of divine experiences have you had?
Well, I've had some visions with ayahuasca, had some visions with meditation, definitely with other entheogens, definitely doing with yoga and other things, and been out of out of body, astral travel, complete, as Maslow said, that oceanic feeling when you're flooded with all this incredible bliss. Because I would say all the parts of me were aligned. Things like that. Insights into the nature of reality that I can often not express in normal conversation, I have to do intros or create art to express what is sublime. Yeah, things like that. I mean, I've never had any sort of revelation about the prophecy or the future of the world, so I can't give anybody any lottery numbers or when we're going to war or anything like that.
Right, but sounds like, well, you might have some things you can share just simply that might be interesting.
Yeah, but I can't share with them because, again, it's like, how do you share what cannot be shared? What is beyond words? What is beyond reason? What is eternal? So that's why art, introductions, myth. I mean, that's the way. That's how people. And our minds are made of stories. I told you the ego creates a story because our minds are made of stories and patterns, not facts. That's what
Right.
moves human beings. So that's how we can understand things through great myths and stories.
And we have a lot of that in pop culture.
That's why it's popular.
So what are what notable themes or notable stories do you find interesting?
That we live in a simulation ruled by Archons. So
is that apparently Westworld talks about that? I haven't seen it.
Yes, very much. That is, Westworld is very Gnostic. There's a new movie also called Bliss. I don't know in the UK if it's out, but it's on Amazon. That's very Gnostic. There's a lot of good Gnostic movies. The Twin Peaks series was Gnostic. The Lego movies, if you watch the first Lego movie, is very Gnostic.
Well, I suppose it would be a simulation if it's all made out of pieces.
Yeah, and at the end, there's one haughty father figure that rules everything and wants every Lego to be organized, no matter what. He wants no creative thinking. So Will Ferrell plays the Demiurge.
I like that. So, I mean, there's Lovecraft. There's interesting themes in that. It's very dark, but it reminds me of mysticism for sure.
Yeah, I mean, the idea
Azathoth, for example.
Yeah, Azathoth could be the Demiurge, because in the Gnostics used to call the Demiurge the blind god or the idiot god, and that's what Azathoth is. He's this idiot in the middle of the universe that has created humanity, and you hope he doesn't wake up. And that's very much who the Demiurge is. And again, these sort of these supreme beings that don't have the best interest of humanity. That's definitely very Gnostic.
But of course, I mean, in Gnosticism, there is definitely this awareness that there are positive beings. Is Sophia one of them?
Yeah, you could say so. She's in their story. She is the wisdom of God. She is. She fell out of the Pleroma. They don't really say why. There's theories that they give, but I think she is very much Luciferian or like Prometheus. And she, for some reason, rebels into the Pleroma, creates the material world through her sorrow, and she gives birth to the Demiurge. The Demiurge is abortion. All her negativity and her sins come through and become the Demiurge, and he takes over the universe, and then Sophia and the Demiurge are sort of at war with each other.
Right. And the Demiurge is okay, what's the connection? What's the difference between the Demiurge and the Antichrist?
I don't know. I don't think the Gnostics really had any concept of the Antichrist. That's more in the Orthodox Bible.
Okay. So, what about the Masons? Do they have Gnosticism in there?
Yeah, theology? I mean, I think a lot of the Masons are certainly friendly to a lot of the Gnostic ideas. I mean, you do. I went through some Gnostic church rites at a Freemason hall, and the idea of a brotherhood of man and the lodges and a connection with all human beings, and that is connected to Freemason Gnosticism. Obviously, Where it separates is the Masons have the idea of the grand architect as a good being. The Gnostics would disagree with that the architect is somebody you should trust. So there is definitely a separation. Also, the Masons and the Gnostics would probably agree on Gnosis, a direct experience that is very personal with you, with something higher and greater.
Yeah.
And Hermeticism has been very influential for the Freemasons too. At least it was during the Enlightenment. So that's definitely the Gnostic connection there.
Was the Enlightenment enlightened?
At some points, yeah. I mean, again, it's a mixed bag, shadow and light. Good things happened, bad things happened.
That's true. It's easy to take a stance on anything and to say this is dark and this is light.
Yeah,
I like
even
this.
the Dark
I'm
Ages
that.
were the Dark Ages were not an age, they were not dark. You had places in Europe with a lot of advancements. You had the Muslim caliphates, you had Persia, you had the Byzantine Empire. There was a lot of good stuff in the Dark Ages, a lot of bad stuff.
Definitely, yeah. So, do you know much about Native American spirituality?
No, I should know more.
What about the Sethians?
They were a sect of Gnosticism who were, they were very edgy. And they were the ones who were not compromising towards the nature of this universe, which they saw as a terrible construct keeping our divine spark. They saw the Demiurge as completely out of his mind. So they were very unapologetic. They were like the punk rockers of Gnosticism. Other Gnostic groups had a softer view on the Demiurge. In reality, they didn't see it as bad. They were closer to the Hermetics. They saw the universe ultimately as fine. It wasn't home, but it was fine. The Sethians had no such, they were not going to compromise with reality.
So they just want to go back to the source of all creation, and they think
eventually, I mean, the idea of Gnosis is transformation, to transform yourself in the best version of yourself, to be a complete human being. Like the Greeks, they saw that the complete human being was really something close to divine or even higher than the gods. So it was transformation, because you were supposed to help others on this plane of existence. It wasn't just escaping. It was transform yourself, be whole, be individuated, bring everything in, and then help heal others who might want to wake up or who need your help. And then eventually, yes, it would be escaping the wheel of karma, escaping the cycle of reincarnation, and ultimately going up to the Pleroma with Sophia.
Yeah, and that's certainly a very pleasant thought. Although, I mean, I've discovered, something I've come across in spirituality is this idea of some people are very pessimistic, some people are very optimistic, some people are in the middle. So for me, I feel like ultimately we do want to journey back to the Pleroma or source or what have you. But I don't see it as fundamentally a mistake that we're down here. I see it as like God learns about itself through this whole process of sparks of the creation coming into the material and then coming back after having a lot of difficulty and learning a lot of lessons. Whereas other people might say, well, this whole thing is just fundamentally like screwed up and we need to go back to the divine and that's it. So where does your perspective fit into this?
I mean, both sides, it's the same game. I mean, the Hermetics who saw that the universe was good and we were just here sort of well, we're like, there's a video game player and we are the avatars that are learning certain things within a simulation. And the Gnostics who said, no, we are divine sparks trapped in this hostile world. It's the same difference. I mean, the game is still the same.
Yeah, exactly.
Whatever fuels you still have to go through those rituals. You have to become whole. You have to help others. You have to expand your consciousness. You cannot buy into the consumer materialistic culture I mean, any spirituality tells you that, don't buy into matter, don't be attached to others in the world, seek something greater, try to make contact with a higher plane of existence, and be good. How it happened, and at the end of the day, it's whatever story you want to tell yourself, as I say.
Right. What's the difference between Luciferianism and Satanism?
Oh, that's another argument that I get confused with. Such a.
Well, my
I'd
idea
rather
might
not
be
go
that,
into it. I'd rather not go into it. It's like it's like an internet argument.
well, there is a distinction between like one might be an entirely, you could have a entirely materialistic worldview, whereas you could have a perspective that, I mean, some might view Gnosticism as Luciferian, especially if they're like mainstream Christians, right?
Oh yeah, they do.
And that's probably why you don't really want to get too much into it, because it gets so messy.
Yeah. It gets really ridiculous. It's whatever rocks your boat, whatever perspective you want to have.
I mean,
I don't
that's
have
a good
time.
perspective.
Yeah. I
So-
think all these religions want the same thing. People just they want to be better, and they want to get out of a place where there is no suffering. What's wrong with that? We don't want pain.
So it's like we're in an arcade and there's different games.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
All right. So what do you think about Norse spirituality or religion? The Norse religion.
Well, it certainly has certain Gnostic tendencies. It came later. I want to do some more work on it because, as some have pointed out, Odin and Loki definitely have a lot of Hermes in there, and their idea of how we are all trapped into fate, but we can get out of fate with a little bit of sense of humor, or through the cycles get out of fate, because the Gnostics were very much into parody and mocking. But I'd have to do some more work before I connect. I haven't gotten there yet. I mean, I know I like the Norse mythology, the stories, Ragnarok, all the gods, but I haven't gotten to the point where I can connect it to Gnosticism.
Right. Yeah. This is a lot to go into, and it's just there's so many ideas we've come up with, right? And it's fitting them together. It's quite a task, even if it's fascinating.
Yeah. Don't overthink things. That's a trap. Remember, there's a
Oh,
million
yeah.
personalities inside of you. They're all competing for something. So enjoy it. Have an experience. I think that's the best thing. What stories move you and bring about an out of transcendental experience, and enjoy that.
What counts
the facts
as what counts as a transcendental experience?
as a transcendental experience?
Yeah.
Well, something that makes connection with something that is beyond this world, a sense of
Resonates.
ecstasy.
What about music?
Bliss.
Music can definitely make you feel that way.
Yeah, no doubt.
But is it more than really relating to something and getting emotional?
I would say so. When I have felt it, it seems something like, what did Socrates say? Or what was the effects after those who came out of a mystery religion? How, if it was real mysticism or not, they lost their fear of death. And all of us, when we're in that zone, if you don't fear death and you kind of are in the flow of life, then it's definitely transcendental. If you're still fearing death, then it's probably just emotional.
Is there a sort of in-between area where you have less fear for death, but you still fear it a bit?
Yeah,
Well, that's what I've got.
Yeah. There's
It's a
gradients
scale.
of it. Yeah, it's always, there's no, the world pulls you back in, the ego pulls you back in, the Archons try to bury you again in other stories.
What are the different stages of life?
I don't know.
No, I'm just curious to see what you'd come up with.
Yeah, I don't know.
Well, isn't that supposed to be a very spiritual phrase?
I don't know that either.
Well, there we go. This is, I don't knowception. Oh, Inception's it got interesting themes to it, hasn't it?
Yeah, that's definitely a Gnostic movie.
Yeah. Well, we actually went through all these questions I wrote down like pretty quickly. Like, what's your opinion on Atlantis?
On Atlantis.
Yeah.
Fascinating story. I might lean that it might be true with all the evidence out there. But again, you're asking questions we could do a whole show on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So is there anything you want to go into in this conversation? Because
No, I think we've covered good things.
yeah, well, it's well, I enjoyed talking to you.
Yeah, it was fun.
Yeah, sometimes I might go on for like one of my episodes is over 2 hours. But
Yeah, it all depends. I've done those, but I need something a little bit more preparation. What are we going to cover? This and that. So
yeah, you kind of feel it out and you can tell the trajectory. So I kind of feel like, yeah, we're kind of coming to a close here. But I really enjoyed it. So thanks for coming on.
thank you.
All right, and thanks, listener, for listening. So yeah, see if you can get to Gnosis eventually. And bye for now.